Welcome to the CFB Dynasty Podcast with hosts Matt Knowles and Brian McElfish.
Hey everybody, how you doing out there? This is Matt Knowles. That's Brian McElfish. This is the CFB Dynasty Podcast, Championship Edition. Wait, no, it's not. This is the Losers Bracket Edition because neither me or BMAC are competing in Week 13 in the championships. Last week during Week 12, we all got together, or some of us got together over at BMAX. We got to get ourselves some brisket. It was me along with three of the four guys that were in the playoffs, and BMAC was the only person there that was in the playoffs that suffered crushing, terrible, horrible defeat. BMAC, how are you feeling this week after last week's give out some brisket and lose?
So I'm not much of an emotional person. I'm just not. Unless it's sports. And fantasy sports is one of those things to kind of bring out the anger in me. I don't punch doors and stuff in my house anymore like I did when Jordan Reed fumbled going into the end zone to kind of miss out on the leading score against Georgia back in 2011 or whenever that was. But Gordy comes over to the house. One of the nicest, would you agree? One of the nicest guys.
Well, I would say one of the nicest guys, but Gordy has now obtained a new nickname because Gordy is one of those kill him with kindness kind of guys. So it's Gordy the Hexmaster Miller, because whenever you play Gordy, something crappy happens on your team. And Gordy just has a way to be so nice about it. There were so many times last week, and he's like, because Brian, if you guys have ever been to BMAC's house, it's more like a war room. He had probably a combined 150 inches of television set up watching games. Gordy would be like, hey, Brian, the Penn State tight end just got a touchdown. Did you see that? Knowing that BMAC had the running back. So it was his way of saying somebody scored and it wasn't you. That was awesome.
So it was all day long, right? So we started, I think the first guy showed up around noon, right before the games, and Gordy showed up too. So it was all day until I officially lost, which there isn't an official loss. So a part of this Hexmaster thing, have you ever seen anyone out there seen a fantasy playoff performance where this guy has a combined -4 points from his quarterbacks in fantasy so far, and he's won both games against two of the elite teams, being my team and Mike Dillingham's team? He started Jaden Daniels with I think we do this right. I don't know if we've talked about this, but interceptions, fumbles, they matter so much in a regular football game. So we have -3 for an interception. He ended up with -7 point some fantasy points. Yep. And then he had Cam Rising, who had like 3 or 3.4, something like that, a collective -4 fantasy points. And he's won both games. And this takes me back to like the fantasy playoff conundrum. Like, how do you just go straight up head to head? Should you have home field advantage based on who scored the most points during the season or who had the most wins or whatever? Man, it's so maddening to just lose a game. But yeah, I've got a goal, and everybody else might have a different goal depending on their scoring system and whatnot. But my goal is 200 points for my team, and I think I go into DraftKings kind of similar sometimes with a different goal. But my team scored 134, and yes, it's all day. It's like, hey Brian, did you see that Singleton just fumbled? And then like Kaytron Allen runs it in. Oh, at least that was Kaytron Allen and not Singleton. Kind of things that you would think but not say out loud. Oh, but he was unfiltered from that regard. Hey Brian, do you want an update? And that became code for his player just caught a catch. He just took the lead. all day long. And by the end of it, it had me Googling things like, all right, custom voodoo dolls. How do I turn this on him next year? And it was fun and maddening. Nothing went right for me.
It was a sight to behold. It was a sight to behold. As the guy on the outside, watching two of the guys that were there in the room with me, knowing they were going to win, and watching BMAC, who was the host of the event, going down in flames in dramatic fashion. I wanted to be able to enjoy this as well, but two things for me. We did pick'ems for draft picks next year. We said nobody was going to be able to like lose into a better position in next year's draft. So even the guys in the bottom bracket had to play each other for picks. I came in as a prohibitive favorite in my game. And you want to talk about the Hex? My defense decided to be absolute garbage. And my opponent's defense, he had Penn State. And if you guys watched the Penn State game, Rutgers could not keep onto the ball. They could not keep a hold of the ball. Penn State scores 3 defensive scores. And based on our league scoring, it was a 63 to 2 point differential on defenses that lost me the game. All the while watching, and this kind of brings us back to something you just heard us talking about, BMAC. Just watching NC State on my phone have an absolutely pathetic junior varsity style game. And it used to be where like weeks 1 and 2, everybody'd be like, oh, they're going to sit their starters. And you weren't really sure what you were going to get out of fantasy games in 1 and 2. And then there was kind of like that thing, 12 is kind of a frustrating week because you had a lot of teams playing some money games and all that. But I feel like this year more than ever, you saw teams sitting just an inordinate amount of players in week 12 getting ready for rivalry week 13. And I feel like that this week compromised the semifinals more than it ever has because the number of players, I mean, Jordan Shipley sat for the vast majority of a game against Miami for no reason.
Yes.
Excuse me. Will Shipley. My bad. I was just so frustrated that I've called the wrong. Will Shipley sat for so long unnecessarily in that game. And that was just NC State sat 7 offensive starters. I mean, they said a lot of them were injured and they probably were, but
here's the thing too at play that I've heard from very, very good, reporters that there's a lot of teams struggling with players that are sitting because they're just sitting and they're going to portal here pretty soon. And they're just not interested in finishing out the season. This is an issue that, college football fans are going to face. So, man, so when you talk about fantasy tiers, you're thinking typically like going into the season, where are you going to draft players? Well, I've got a bunch of fantasy tiers in my reaction, the real kind of tiers here. So looking at my team, you talk about Shipley. Clemson scored 40 points. You tell me that going into the game, I feel pretty darn good that Shipley's going to have a couple touchdowns there. Rashee Rice, SMU versus Tulane. If you say it's going to hit the over by about 20 points in that game, you got to feel great about Rice. Texas scores 55. Worthy only has 2 catches. Brock Bowers gets 2 points. And then another thing, so the Alabama defense, very end of the game against Austin Peay. Austin Peay is backed up. They're inside their own 10. Second down, trying to throw a pass out of the end zone. And it goes right to a Bama linebacker, right in the chest. And it's a walk-in touchdown, and he drops it.
Yeah, that was a game that too. You're like, man, this is going to be 100-0 game against Austin Peay. We talked about it last week on the podcast, and that game was far too close for what you would expect out of a fantasy performance. Alabama versus anybody at that level. That was very disappointing, just like Alabama's been fantasy-wise all year, that game was as close as it was.
Still unable to get that passing game going. Bryce Young ended with 20 points, and that was my quarterback, and just an all-around, just a weird, disappointing. It's really an end to the season that just kind of leaves you deflated. When you go 10-2 in the regular season, and then it's just 1 week your team sucks and you get knocked out. What do you think about fantasy playoffs in general? Is the playoff the right way to determine a champion? Are there any other ways that you've seen it done, or or whatnot.
I feel like, obviously we're in the USA, and that's how the USA determines championships in every sport. I feel like you just kind of have to do it. I mean, it's not about who the best team is. It's about who plays the best game at the end of the season. It's just, that's always who it is. If you look at the winners of the Super Bowl, are we even allowed to say that on the podcast? The winner of the big game, and who is the one who wins that game? It's not always the best team in the league. I mean, you look back to the Buffalo Bills in the late 80s, early 90s. They were prohibitively the best team in the NFL, but they go down as the only team in American pro sports history to go to and lose 4 consecutive championships. You look at the Patriots when they lost to the Giants. They were way better than the Giants, but the Giants got those wins, and the Giants are remembered for that, and the Patriots are remembered for going 18-1. So I feel like there's no real way for us to make that determination, because if you don't go to that game, then say if you just say, hey, scoring over the season, somebody could have a great first 8 weeks and be so far ahead that everybody else is just out of it, not even caring about
I think that sucks. When the end of the year, there's nothing. When you just go by points, that does suck.
It's
or
tough.
You don't have a playoff. I think that sucks too. I was trying to propose like a balance in the playoffs with like, all right, so we'll reward, you for the season long, being good for the whole season. I think there needs to be the playoff element, but how do you reward a team for having the best roster? How do you reward them in the playoffs? Yes, you can give them bye week. We do that in our league. That's good. But then do you give them a little bump going into the playoffs against their opponent? Would love to hear what other people have going on in their playoffs. If, hit us up on the Discord, hit us up on Twitter. But yeah, man, like I was just trying to think of a way you reward, because you want to reward the best team, and then of course have the playoff.
Yeah, we would absolutely love. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was going to say the same thing. We would love for you guys on Discord. If you're on the Discord, you're probably there because you're in a fantasy league. You're probably not there. You're probably not there if you're not in a fantasy league. You're probably, so let us know what you guys are doing. Are you guys still just running a standard playoff? Are you guys trying to bring some other elements in there? What are your pros and cons as well? Because that's one of the biggest things. There's ideas out there that are good, but if you try to implement them, it's kind of like you've tried to fix this thing over here that's broken, but the fix makes it more broken on the other side.
Yeah.
I don't really know right now if there's a good fix, because like you said, if people are sitting and they're not interested in playing because they don't want to be injured going into the draft season or going into bowl season, you still have to play the game as far as fantasy goes. But like NC State last year, NC State, let me say this can just show you how crazy this season is. Last week, they were alternating their 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks all game. There's a chance that their 4th string quarterback, Ben Finley, starts this week. If he does, it'll be the first time in NC State history that they will have 4 different starting quarterbacks in the same season. And I think that is a part of it, like you said, is people being unwilling to play. I'm not claiming that MJ Morris or Jack Chambers is unwilling to play, but there's this, people aren't playing through injuries as much because they don't want to hurt their draft stock. They don't want to hurt their transfer portal stock. And it's very frustrating because there's not a lot of stuff you can do about that with the roster construction the way that it is. We're probably going to have some serious talks in our off season because we have very limited pickups. We may have to have some talks about that in the off season, because it does suck when you've got guys that are just uninterested in playing in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, so if you play out the home field advantage type of thing for the fantasy playoffs, like let's just say, and it's just to make a round number here, let's just say you reward every win gets you 5 fantasy points in the playoff games that you play in. That would have definitely been the difference in our game, because I lost by 11.4. So it's one of those things that it would have sucked if we pushed that live and I proposed it and then my team advances, but that's not the goal here, is to do anything to make my team better. It's just to reward the best team basically and come up with a way to kind of do that for determining a champion.
Like we said, we'd love to hear what you guys have to say about that too, because we're all in this together. We all have the same length seasons. We may have different rules, but we all want to go in and try to champion at the end. And we want to know what you guys are trying, because you know what, there may be a couple of really good ideas that we all have, but it's not the perfect solution. But if we put all of our ideas together, there might be something where kind of a combination of them may be something we could all try out. Do want to make sure we give a shout out here real quick to Doug Gravely. Doug is he's the rookie in our league until he's not the rookie, even though he's been in the league now for a couple of years. He's always going to be the rook. Doug not only is going to the college championship, Doug is one of the top guys in our pro league as well. And one of the things that we always try to do is reward global domination. The CFB Dynasty Home League is a college pro full dynasty league where your guys graduate up to your pro team. Doug came in and has got both of his teams at the top. He is right now the prohibitive guy that is right there at the top to be the global domination champ. To have a great college team and pro team at the same time is very difficult, and more than likely Doug is going to take that home. So big props there to Doug for probably going to be the global domination champ. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I think the only way, and I've got an idea for this too, the only way to really make that global domination work and make it to where people care about it is we add a little bit of money to the league fee, and the global domination takes home the pot. Whatever
that's what we talked about last year, and I think that's probably what we need to do, is because global needs to mean something. If you have a college pro dynasty, that's the only way to really make that. You got to give an extra award for global, and that's I think we agreed on it last year at the draft meeting too.
Oh,
so
did we?
I think so.
Okay.
We had so many things we talked about. So to kind of get back on track. You talked about everything really that happened last week, other than the fact we did get some brisket. For those of you guys out there, we talk about brisket all the time. Be back, smoke some brisket.
It's another thing that went wrong with my day. So the smoker was acting up to, the first 2.5 hours of the brisket cook. It ran about 40 degrees or so too hot, which, made it mediocre brisket in the end. It wasn't that melt in your mouth, amazing kind of, well, not melt in your mouth, but you know what I mean. It was a restaurant quality. Like it kind of sucked. So basically everything went wrong with that day.
Hey, but it was still a good way for us to all get together and have some fun. It was the first Saturday since July that I wasn't either refereeing at one of my daughter's out of town soccer games or at a Comic-Con. So when the invite came out, I was like, you know what, I kind of have to go over there because, it might be next July by the time I get to do it again.
Yeah,
but it was a good time, and it was great being able to see to go over. We actually got to talk about some of the worst bad beats we've ever had. That's another thing we want you guys to share up there on the Discord. We went through some of the baddest beats that we've ever had. I know that BMAC has lost championships in dramatically bad ways. I've lost championships in dramatically bad ways. I lost a pro game 2 weeks ago in a dramatically bad way that I'm still salty about. I have the game won in the pros, and I've got Devontae Smith. The Eagles try to run the Miami Miracle play at the end of the game. Devontae Smith throws the lateral that nobody picks up. The Redskins take it in for the score. So I lose my game on Devontae Smith having a lost fumble at the end of the game. If that was a championship, I don't know. I might be having to go over to BMAC's house to punch a hole in his wall. But we've had some championship games like that. We want to hear from you guys, and we're going to hear about your baddest beats, and we'll be able to share those things on a future podcast. And we'll talk about future podcasts here in just a little bit.
Yeah, and we can talk about some other reactions, some players that probably helped your team advance. So one for Gordy, obviously going into the night, my team was done because my last guy, Tyler Scott, started his game at 4, which also kind of sucks. I would rather have, the last shot, but I was only up by, 30, I think, going into that game. A.T. Perry scores 36. Then Cam Rising for Gordy only scored 3. So it ended up being a really close game in our matchup. But yeah, 10 catches, 119 yards, 3 touchdowns for Perry. One less would have been nice, but he had a great game. Also, Matthew Golden, another great game, surprisingly scoring his best of the year against me. Tyjae Spears, man, Tulane put the beat down on SMU.
Yeah, that was surprising.
Thursday
That
night
was
game.
surprising.
59-24. Yo. Let's see. Some other players that did really well. One that surprised me was me shooting my own self in the groin by leaving Chase Brown on the bench for Illinois. It's one of those when you look at the data, because Illinois just runs the ball and they are really good against the run. So you kind of figure at Michigan, who's really good against the run too, it's like you got to sit this guy kind of deal. But Chase Brown, boy, was I wrong. 140 yards, 2 touchdowns. And if I would have started him in my flex, I would be playing again this week against Doug. But no, I shot myself in the groin there. There's plenty of others that just tore it up last week. How about what's his name? So let me go. I'm just gonna pull this one thing right up real quick. Rattler, that game against Tennessee. I watched all of that game. That was insane. Rattler ended up being the high points getter for the week. 65.9 points in our league. And there's a little bit of bonuses in there probably. But Jaren Hall, also for BYU against Stanford, 64 points. A couple of quarterbacks that you had really high expectations going into the year. Players that were going to be, week in, week out starters in a lot of deep leagues that just didn't pan out. But dang, week 12, if you started them, they killed it. Michael Pratt, too, for Tulane.
Raheem Sanders for Arkansas.
Yep.
232 yards and 3 touchdowns. That was the difference in Doug's game over the venerable Mike Davis. 50 points out of that performance put him over the top.
Yeah, Bijan had a bounce back game after scoring 2. Then he goes for 50. Scored 2 against the Hexmaster there, and then puts up 50.3 last week. The USC-UCLA game was a fun back and forth one. A lot of fantasy players in there. Will Rogers had a great game, and it was just all around, overall fun week of football. South Carolina, Tennessee was really the headliner and the shocker there, as Tennessee kind of, you expect them to beat down South Carolina. The lowly Florida crushed South Carolina the week before, and then South Carolina crushes Tennessee the week after, while Florida's getting beat by Vanderbilt. So you'd have no idea what to expect there. Now Tennessee goes in without Hendon Hooker, which really sucks for his Heisman chances and the great season, all the momentum Tennessee's building up. Now they go in, I think, at Vanderbilt this week. It's going to be a sleepy game there for Tennessee, maybe. But yeah, I think that's it in terms of players that I had to kind of talk about here. Great game great lineup of games this week.
All right. You ready to go again?
Let's do it.
All right. So if you guys take a look down here, you see that I just changed my name back. It was Matt Krampus Knowles for the first half of this. I was on a podcast the other night for a Christmas horror anthology that we're in, and everybody changed their names to something Christmassy or horror-like, and I just realized it was still on here. So if you guys are wondering what the heck that was about, that was a leftover from a previous cast. So now it's Matt Knowles and Dr. English. All right.
I was waiting for a reference there.
I did not even realize it was there, man. I've been under weather for the last couple of days. It just took me till 40 minutes into this podcast or whatever it is to realize that was there. All right. So let's get into some other thoughts that we had. So Virginia Tech is canceled officially for this week. It's fallout again from the shootings that happened on the Virginia campus. Tough break for the guys at Virginia Tech. That was their senior night, and senior night gets canceled. So they're going to have to come up with another way to be able to recognize their seniors. But there are bigger things in the world than senior night. one thing that you guys might wonder is what's going to happen when we are done with this podcast. We still have other things to talk about. As far as rankings, you guys definitely want to get to who we have in our rankings for this week. But you may be wondering what the heck we're going to do when this week is over. Are you guys still going to be running shows? Are you just going to be missing us for the next 6 months or whatever it may be? Yeah, we're still going to run some podcasts. There's some things we can do in the off season, but the most current thing we're going to do is we're going to run the first annual CFB Dynasty Bowl Pick'em. That's going to be open to anyone. It can be you. It can be your coworkers. It can be whatever it may be. Bring your friends, bring your family, and we're just going to have fun. We're going to do a bowl pick'em. We're going to be able to have that be the thing we're going to talk about, the performances that happened in those bowls as we're moving forward. And the person who gets the top score in that is going to get Brian, you want to tell him? You want me to tell him?
Go for it, dude.
Whoever wins is going to get a free subscription to CFBDynasty.com for the 2023 season. Obviously, if myself or BMAC win, then it's going to go down to the next person in line that's not affiliated with CFBDynasty.com or the podcast. But whoever is the top point getter is going to do that. So let's have fun with this. If you're on the Discord, share it around. We're going to make sure that everybody knows the site we're going to use. We're not sure which site it's going to be yet, but it probably is going to be like ESPN. But we'll make sure that everybody knows so we can have fun with that. We want to get as many of you guys in there so we can all have fun together and go from there.
Yeah, man. Sounds great. Looking forward to it. I did one with Zach Tao last year, and I know on the Burning the Red Shirt pod, they'll be doing that too. And we'll have plenty of stuff coming up in the off season. I can't wait to probably, I don't know if I'll start it probably over Christmas break and whatnot, doing the 2023 rankings and getting that done. We're going to have the portal season. That's going to be wild. So we'll have portal rankings and all kinds of different things that will start building up for 2023, a year where Gordy will have his face all over my wall with X's on them. And I can't wait.
I love it. So, hey, before we get to news and notes, before we get to rankings, I got a question for you, BMAC. So looking at your team in CFB Dynasty, tell me who you think was your most impressive player, the player that you got the most out of this year, and the player that was the most disappointing. Who are those two players and why?
Disappointing is easy. Kayshon Boutte. One of the reasons he's disappointing is because the pronunciation of his name changed to Booty, and that's fine, but I hate when that changes. So expect these broadcasters to get it right. He was a big disappointment, and Tyrone Tracy as well, and Eric Gilbert. 3 talented players, big disappointments. And hopefully at least 2 of those guys will get over to my NFL squad here pretty soon. And Zach Evans kind of was hurt all year long, and you see all the success Judkins is having at Ole Miss. If that was Zach Evans having that success, which it easily could have been, that would have been fantastic. I would say, who am I most pleased with? Chase Brown. He was one that I was early on, all in the offseason. We had him ranked higher than everyone else. And it's just kind of one of those follow the coach things. I wish I would have bet the over on the win total for Illinois, because I had a great feeling about, when you have a team that's really, really good in terms of understanding their identity. And Brett Bielema's great at building a great O-line and running the ball, and they feature one running back. I felt great about that. I wish I would have even ranked him higher, even though we had him higher than everyone else. And we posted about him in the offseason. He was a sleeper. Everyone should have targeted. And he was already on my team at that point. But, yeah, man, he killed it. He was very consistent all year. If I only would have started him against Michigan, I'd be able to start him this week against Northwestern. But
so, what are you most excited about the guys you have on your squad? What's got you with some hope for 2023 about your roster?
In terms of players that are coming back, got Xavier Worthy. I like that. Will Shipley. I don't know where we're going to have him ranked in the 2023 rankings. I don't really know what's going to happen with Clemson at quarterback. Like, will DJU transfer to get a fresh start, or will he stick it out and we'll struggle through this quarterback conundrum again next year? Man, that's up in the air. And I think the way Clemson finishes their season against South Carolina and eventually a bowl game or potentially a playoff game will determine that. But yeah, I think Shipley will be a top 10 running back. If Chase Brown comes back for his senior year, he'll be a top 3 or 4 running back. And then Singleton, that one's going to be a running back share all the way. But you look at Drew Aller and him taking over next year, he likes to run the ball too, and he's a big guy. So I don't know if Singleton is going to be who we wanted him to be going into the season. Kind of seeing him take over as carries, get great practice reports, and just hearing about how good he is. And he is so good, but Katron Allen also is really good. A really good running back who's going to take some of his own drives and, not give way on the goal line, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, on my team was very disappointing this year. It was very frustrating because coming out of last season, I had an inordinate amount of players. I think I had 7 wide receivers, either graduate or go to the pros early. So my wide receiver room was completely cleared out. In the draft, I tried to fill in my wide receiver room. Didn't really work out the way that I wanted. I got some good players, Malachi Corley. I got Chris Thornton. But my first round pick was Cedric Tillman. And hey, guys are going to get injured. But when your first round pick, who's a high NFL prospect, is out for the whole season, that pretty much threw my entire team into turmoil. Quarterbacks, I had a rough season at quarterback as far as with Bachmeier transferring, Devin Leary being out for the year. Luckily, I had Frank Harris there, but I definitely did not have the depth that I wanted. The thing that I was most disappointed in were the running backs that stayed on my team. You look at someone like Roschon Johnson. Roschon Johnson had an unbelievable bowl game last year, and it looked like that was going to be a catalyst for him to actually get some kind of, I'm not going to say a full-time share with Bijan Robinson, but maybe some carries. And Roschon Johnson has been completely invisible this year and was a waste of a roster spot. He didn't do anything for me all year. Very frustrated. Had a lot of other guys that transferred. Chaz Maluzzi transferred. Jarek Broussard just were not what you wanted him to be. Chaz Maluzzi didn't transfer this year. I'm just saying he was just not the guy that you wanted him to be. You thought he was going to be. The thing I am the most excited about on my team, though, is some of my freshman running backs. I made sure that this year I loaded up on as many young running backs as I could. Some of them I hit on, some of them like Omarion Hampton for this season I missed on, but having Austin Genty and also having Damian Martinez from Oregon State, I feel like that could be the core of my team going into next year. So hopefully I can build around those guys with the obscene number of draft picks and obscene number of people I'm going to have to fill in for next year.
Yeah, our league is harder than most, where you can only pick up 3 players a year. You can also only drop 3 players a year. So you get dead weight on the roster, and you've got to find creative ways to get rid of it. Because really, you see it when you get closer to the playoffs or even midseason when players are starting to get hurt, bye weeks are happening. You've only got 7 running back spots, and you can start 3 of them. So if 2 of them are backups, and 2 of them are hurt, you got problems. So that's one of those things where you've got to find a creative way to make some trades. You got to get rid of some of this stuff, Maluzzi or Hampton.
Well, some of those guys are going to be, they're going to be finding ways off my roster or trades. We'll have to see. I will say this: the biggest mistake I made all year, and I hate to say it because I really like LaDamian Webb, but as far as this season went, LaDamian Webb was probably the most frustrating because he either did nothing, was injured, or had like a 40-point game. There was no in between for LaDamian Webb, and I picked him up over Israel Abanikanda, and that is probably my most regretted move this year, was not picking up Abanikanda and picking up LaDamian Webb in his spot, because we all know Abanikanda set the Pittsburgh rushing record, beat out Tony Dorsett for single game rushing. He's a guy that's got a huge future out there. Doesn't mean LaDamian Webb doesn't have a future, but Abanikanda, I think, is the real deal.
Yeah, so October 1st for Webb, October 1st through the end of the season, he goes 15 fantasy points, then 0.7, then 2.6, then 35, then 48, then 8. Rough, man. Yeah. It's hard to find those, but you got to find the guys that get consistent carries. And then you have like a backfield like NIU where, they've got Whaley, they've got Ontario Brown, and then they're starting to work in this freshman near the end of the season, and it's just frustrating. Sometimes when they get hot and they go off, they'll go off for 3 or 4 touchdowns and put up 40 fantasy points. But then they also could get 8 carries for 12 yards the next game and someone else takes off. Those are definitely the spots to avoid. If you're in best ball, it's different. But in a standard league, or especially one like ours where you're limited on pickups and drops, you got to avoid those kind of situations.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like I said, I think we're going to have some serious talks about how to try and mitigate what's going on with the transfer portal and people just not wanting to play at the end of the season. I don't know if there was much we can do without compromising our rosters, but we definitely are interested in hearing what other leagues are doing as well.
Yeah, I think like moves do have to be made in a league like ours where it's really strict. So yeah, we'll figure that out.
Well, with that being said, we know that if you're listening to this podcast, there is probably 1 of 2 reasons. 1, you're just a fan, but 2, you might be still in your championship and you want to get some information about what's happening out there so you can make informed decisions. That's what CFBDynasty.com is about. So let's go to the news and notes.
News and notes.
All right, so some big updates. So Penn State wide receiver Parker Washington did not travel for the game last weekend. Announced he's out for the season with an undisclosed injury. So next you got Mitchell Tinsley, but after that the wide receivers are Harrison Wallace and Keandre Lambert-Smith. So definitely a big hit there for the Penn State wide receiver core. Huge hit for Iowa. Sam Laporta was not on the depth chart on Monday after leaving the game last weekend with a lower body injury. Laporta has been one of the most consistent tight ends. He's not been one of those top 2s, but he has definitely probably been in the top 5 or 6 as far as consistency this year at the tight end position. So if Sam Laporta is not there for Iowa, that's going to be a big hit. That could be the difference in a championship game if you have him on your roster. Ohio, Curtis Rourke reportedly done for the season in pregame on Tuesday. That's rough for them. CJ Harris got the start. Did not have the greatest game as far as passing went, but he did have 3 rushing touchdowns, so he might be able to help a team in this championship run. Ball State running back Carson Steele left the game after being put in concussion protocols. That's another huge one. Carson Steele's been winning games for people right and left at the end of the season, and having him go out early is definitely cost some people some games. Let's see here. We had some transfer portal information at the end of the season. Trey Sanders for Alabama, Grant DuBose, Charlotte, Anthony Quealy, Syracuse, Taylor Thompson, Charlotte. So Charlotte's got 2 guys on their passing attack that have decided they want to get into the portal.
That's so crazy that you have to think about that kind of stuff from a fantasy point of view. Not only do you have that 4-game redshirt rule, and now you have people just sitting out because they're about to enter the portal at the end of the year. There's a lot to go in, a lot to think about in the offseason in terms of how we handle the playoff, how we handle all of these things, because it's so different than it was just 3 years ago.
Yeah, frustrating. So let's see here. So Malik,
you know what? What else? What else made my weekend suck?
What else made your weekend suck? Tell me.
They postponed the video game. NCAA now they're saying 2024.
I was going to ask you about that because I knew that I know it's been a big deal. They postponed the video game. What do you guys? If you guys haven't heard about this, EA Sports has postponed the game now to summer of 2024. So that's a long ways out.
Yeah, so we can talk about that. I was planning on that being part of our off-season content, but we'll stick to fantasy then for now. Yikes.
So Malik Cunningham for Louisville remains day-to-day. I can tell you that Louisville didn't need him last week. I mean, maybe it's because my team just decided they didn't really want to come out and play. But Malik Cunningham was not even needed in that LSU beatdown of NC State. Adrian Martinez is going to be out this week for Kansas State. Tanner Mordecai, SMU, says he's going to be going pro after this season. That's not a surprise. But yeah, so if he's on your college roster, do not be planning on him doing anything for you next year. You got to get yourself a replacement.
So you got Stone there, though.
We talked about earlier about how NC State could potentially have its fourth starting quarterback in Ben Finley this week. Ben Finley, if you saw the game, he took a huge shot when he was completely wide open at the end of the game. So he left the game. He did come back in, but he definitely was feeling it. I don't even know who the fifth string quarterback is for NC State. I think that it would be what's his name? Thayer Thomas. Yeah, Thayer Thomas would probably be the emergency quarterback. We are so far down the depth chart. I just hope we can have a good game against UNC. It'd be nice if we have a game like last year. That would be awesome. Bo Nix says his ankle's feeling better, better than it did a week ago. Thompson Robinson was practicing with his right hand wrapped. You never want to see that out of a quarterback with a hand injury. Vanderbilt says their depth chart is Mike Wright or AJ Swan. You never really want to see an or thing at quarterback because, if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks, especially in fantasy. The news and notes has got, let's see, West Virginia Garrett Green says he's going to start again this week. So let's get down to some running back action. Keon Clay for Southern Miss is going to be held out this week specifically just to preserve his red shirt. Not that he's somebody that would be in your lineup, but this is another one of those things that comes into the end of the year. You may have a guy that's already used his 4 games, may not play just so we can keep that red shirt going. Kelvin Dean from FAU is going to enter the transfer portal. Let's see here. Kendre Miller, TCU, practiced Tuesday after leaving the game last week. South Carolina, Marshawn Lloyd and Christian Beal-Smith were quote unquote out there at practice, which means they sound a little bit limited. Carson Steele, they expect him to be okay after last week's situation. Let's see here. Real quick, what else do we got here? Pat Bryant, Illinois, practiced on Tuesday after a concussion. Florida State, Micah Pittman and Johnny Wilson are both expected to be available this week. Quentin Johnson, TCU, limited at practice to start the week. Already talked about Sam Laporta, confirmed to be out this week. Wake Forest, Donovan Green, Jamal Banks, both limited to practice on Tuesday after leaving the game Saturday with injuries. Status is going to be determined for this week. That is about it, unless you've got anything special or specific on your side, B-Mac.
Nope. That's good for me.
So with that being said, let's take our final look at the rankings for championship week in college fantasy football for 2022.
All right, let me share the screen for everyone who's on YouTube. If not, you can view this kind of logged in. I did want to mention, in addition to some of the other content stuff we'll be doing differently with the podcast, working on some off-season stuff, 2023 rankings, all that stuff, kind of recap. As we get into recruiting season, we'll look at last year's recruiting class too and kind of see, all right, how good did some of these top recruits do fantasy wise, and who do we want to target going into the new year based on teams that they're on. We'll be looking at transfer spots and all that stuff, but also we're pushing out some highlight videos, so check those out. Comment, subscribe on YouTube. That really helps everything out in terms of algorithms and getting things going. We're really minimalistic on that end right now, so help us out there. Little subscribe, that helps a million. So I've got the rankings pulled up on the screen here. I don't think this guy's been number one, but he's been so hot every week the last 3 weeks, raising his for the year fantasy points per game average. Clayton Tune for Houston, playing against Tulsa, which expected to be a big shootout. There's not a ton of 70 some point over unders this week. But yeah, Clayton Tune and Tulsa are close. So last 3 weeks, 74, 38, 44 in terms of fantasy points. So you love that for Clayton Tune. Super hot going into a game where Houston should put up 40.
I think Caleb Williams at number 2 is very interesting. I'm very interested to hear why you got Caleb Williams at number 2 against Notre Dame. Notre Dame had a shutdown, beat down against Boston College last week. Obviously, Boston College is not USC, but this is
Right.
kind of like the unstoppable object versus the immovable force. So the data believes that Caleb Williams is going to be to overcome Notre Dame's shutdown defense. Tell us a little bit more about why Caleb Williams is up here at number 2.
Yeah, so I was surprised too, honestly, to see that. And going into next year with the rankings that we'll have, you and I and probably someone else will be pushing out our rankings, our individual rankings, but it's going to be the algorithm that ranks these things. And I try and basically do that on a week-to-week basis here with this. So I was surprised to see, the projected score to be 34-28. That makes me think, all right, USC is going to have a lot of success, and their success is going to come throwing the ball or running it with Caleb Williams. So I think he's a really consistent start. And then I look at it another way too. If you've got Caleb Williams on your roster, who would you start over him this week? Would you feel good starting someone else over him? And I like Williams this week. And Notre Dame's got a really good defense, but hasn't faced a passing attack like this one in quite a while this year. Since they played Ohio State, I guess.
There's some other names up here that we've seen throughout the season. Drake May against NC State. I don't even know what's going on with NC State. It's all going to be about who actually plays in that game. It's a big rivalry game, but who knows what the outcome of that game is going to be. Bo Nix, Oregon versus Oregon State. But I really like who we've got at 5 and 8. You got Frank Harris, UTSA versus UTEP. Big battle in Texas. And you got Austin Reed, Western Kentucky versus Florida Atlantic. For whatever reason, I feel like those two games are going to be just way, way above. If I was a betting man, I would bet way over the point spread. I feel like those games are just going to be complete shootouts with no defense, and that could bode very well for fantasy performances. What do you think about having Frank Harris and Austin Reed both in the top 8 in those matchups?
Yeah, I like them there. John Reese Plumlee is another one. UCF is at South Florida. That's another rivalry game, so you gotta kind of be a little bit careful in these rivalry games. But I love that rivalry week is the fantasy championship week because it makes it that much more fun. So yeah, they're projected to score 44, and he's been hot or cold the last 2 weeks though, y'all. So 40 points in week 11, 5 last week. So that one's gonna be. It's a tough one to start him, but I think he's a really good top 10 start. We got him at 10th.
And if you're in the fantasy championship, you hopefully are not starting a quarterback outside the top 10. Right. But I think 2 very interesting matchups just outside the top 10. Chevan Cordeiro for San Jose State. They're bringing Hawaii in. Cordeiro was the starting quarterback at Hawaii. This is going to be the first time he gets to face Hawaii. First time he gets to face his old team after the mass exodus at Hawaii last season. So that could be a big game for him because he wants to go show his old team what's up. And then you've got Todd Centillo, James Madison versus Coastal Carolina. This is going to be a big matchup in that area. 2 teams from very similar spots geographically. James Madison, their first time playing that game as a member of FBS. So I think that's going to be interesting as well. So again, I am not advocating to start either one of those guys. I'm just saying as a college football fan, those are probably going to be 2 very interesting games to watch this week.
Man, absolutely, yeah. And a lot of good rivalry matchups. It's going to be fun to kind of see how these games pan out because it's one of those things where you kind of expect the unexpected. And if you rode somebody like CJ Stroud all year at quarterback, do you start him against Michigan? Last year didn't work out for Ohio State. We'll see if Ohio State has toughened up over the course of, 365 days, if they're able to stop that rushing attack or slow it down at least enough to get everything going. Gonna be some fun matchups, of course. And it's spread out. Like you got games that already played. You got a ton of games. You got games Thursday. You got a ton of games Friday. And of course, Saturday too.
So let's roll on down here to the running backs. The guy at number 1, we talked about him a lot last week. Absolutely just crushing it at the end of the season. Zach Charbonnet for UCLA. He is absolutely a fantasy season killer. If you play against him, you're probably not going to be feeling very good about the end result because he has just been crushing it. Bijan Robinson, Texas. Quinshon Judkins, Mississippi, Deuce Vaughn, Kansas State, all from Power 5 schools. But then you got Dwayne McBride from UAB jumping up in there. This is the end of the season where you get some of these big matchups in a group of 5. You've got Dwayne McBride versus Louisiana Tech at number 3. What do you think about him jumping up in there between all these other Power 5 schools?
Yeah, he's been so consistent all year. If you look at his points per game, he's great. He's the feature of the UAB offense. Last week was kind of a rough week for him, scoring 10.5, but he was playing at LSU. So it's one of those hard choices that terrible matchup, great player. Do you play him in the playoffs? And we had him down in our rankings last week, but he's right back up this week.
Yeah, he is actually the only group of 5 running back in the top 12 that is, like I said, group of 5 running back top 12. Everybody else is Power 5, and almost all of them are in their rivalry matchups.
Yep.
Xavier Valladay, Arizona State versus Arizona. Abanikanda is not really in a rivalry matchup, but Pitt and Miami, has a chance for that to be a massive game if he plays. Muhammad Ibrahim, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Jahmyr Gibbs, Alabama, and Auburn. Is there anybody in that top of the charts that really sticks out to you as somebody you want to make sure that the fantasy listeners out there take notice of?
Been expecting a breakout game from Shipley for Clemson because they have all the pieces there, and they lack the explosiveness at quarterback. So, man, I really, he's one of those wild cards where all year he's been really consistent, between like 14 to 22 fantasy points, and you just expect one of these games he's going to bust a couple or return a kick for a touchdown. I like Shipley a lot against South Carolina. That's going to be another super fun game to watch.
All right, so let's roll down here to the wide receivers. Last time we get to talk about wide receivers all year. Top of the list is Tank Dell, who's had an incredible season. We've already talked about Houston and Tulsa. Rashee Rice, SMU versus Memphis. Already been there. Probably, I would say, a wide receiver 3, probably the guy that came out of nowhere because of injury, and he really was the next man up, Jalen Hyatt for Tennessee.
But will he do that without Hooker this week?
Yeah, that's going to be huge. Without Hendon Hooker at Tennessee, I guess that's something that should have been covered in news and notes. Out for the year with his injury. Who knows what's going to happen? This could be Tillman's week because you never know. Who knows? When you have a different quarterback, who knows what that quarterback's going to be comfortable with? They could be more comfortable with a wide receiver that's not even on the board. You never know what's going to happen when you have a quarterback switch.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I downgraded him a little bit. The data would have him as the number 1 receiver this week. Him or Tank Dell, they're like neck and neck. But with Milton at quarterback, man, I just don't know how comfortable you feel going into the championship matchup. Tennessee's projected to score 40. It's not like Vanderbilt's a great team or anything. But you just feel a little leery rolling out Milton as the quarterback.
And that's one of the things you talk about, would you feel comfortable with in a championship game? I always kind of ride with you don't want to overthink it. You want to ride with the guys that got you there, and if I lose a championship game because my starter has a bad game and I have a guy on the bench that I normally wouldn't play that has a big matchup, a big performance, I can kind of roll with that. But if I make that switch and I overthink it, I don't follow the data, and I put a guy in hoping he's going to have a big matchup and he sucks, and my guy that I started all year has a big matchup on the bench or a big performance on the bench, that's when I have a problem. That's when I can't stomach it because I'm like, why did I make that move? So if you're out there, I would say the same thing. If you're listening to this, I'd say the same thing. Don't overthink it. Trust the data. Yeah, you're going to have some guys that may be a little bit lower on the rankings that you might want to put in there. But like BMAX said, if you've got a guy that's been consistently performing well all year, are you going to feel more comfortable starting a guy that's at wide receiver 19 or quarterback 20 over your guy that got you to that dance in the first place.
Yeah. Yep.
So anybody else on the wide receiver side that you want to talk about? A lot of the names up here are guys that we've talked about all year. I think Demario Douglas from Liberty is probably the only one whose name we haven't really mentioned much, and he's at wide receiver 11.
Yep, and he's been good lately. He's hot. Keelan Stokes has dropped a little bit with the backup quarterback getting starts there, and that at Houston game they should score some touchdowns, but and he's a feature, but it's another one you feel less good about than you would have hoped to going into the championship game because of that quarterback situation there. Chris Thornton had a couple good games in a row now. You feel pretty good about them playing against Coastal. And then you've got those Ohio State receivers that everyone rode all year long up into the championship game, and they're playing Michigan. So some tough matchups for the receivers this week, I feel like. We'll see how some of these go. Josh Downs had a weird down week last week with Drake May, but expect to bounce back against NC State, but it's one of the better defenses they've faced all year long.
Yeah, and that one's going to be about, who all plays for the NC State defense. If they have their full team out there, it could be a fun game. And that's always a great game, no matter how good or how bad either team is. I mean, you want to talk about a hated rivalry. Both of our teams are in two of the most hated rivalries, Florida State, North Carolina State. Those are not just, hey, we don't like them because they are the other team in the state. There's like legitimate hatred for political reasons, for on-campus reasons. When you get deep down into it, the hatred between those schools are strong, and so you never know what's going to happen when you get onto the football field.
And when you get to setting your lineup here, so our goal here is to provide an elite tool set. So that kind of shifted from just we're going to provide rankings. We're going to do it every week. We're going to do it in the preseason and whatnot. Yes, we're going to provide you with the draft kit and then the in-season set of tools that we're building and working towards for next August is to help you have all the information to set the lineup. But it's not all about just the data. You see in my mistake with Chase Brown this past week. There's a feel to it too, and there's like understanding all the context, which the data should give you all the context, but you kind of rule out some of that stuff with rivalry week, as Matt was saying, and use the tool, but set the lineup appropriately, because you're all going to have different choices than just everyone in one set.
All right, so that is the rankings for the final week of the season. BMAC, are we going to run rankings just for the fun of it during bowl season so we can see how that goes in the bowl season?
Potentially, yeah. I'm working on that a little bit with Zach Tao right now for his kind of bowl pick'em thing that we'll use on ours.
Okay.
So possibly. I'm not sure if we'll do it like this and produce it, but that's something we can do if people request it. And then we'll need to get on that here pretty soon. But yeah, as soon as bowl matchups are done and set, the games start kind of quickly. So that's potentially something we can put together. But yeah, man, I'm looking forward to that. It's like this is the very end of the regular season. We've got one more piece of content to produce, and that's the DFS rankings for next week. For this week, for Friday. So we'll get that posted either Thursday or Friday, and then it's just like a breath of fresh air. It's like I switch into off-season Brian, and I'm focused on building everything up for all the way to draft season. So looking forward to doing that with everybody and with you on the pod, because it's something we haven't done consistently until this season.
All right, so that is the final look at the rankings for this season. You want to make sure, if you are not subscribed to CFBDynasty.com, you want to make sure you get up there and you do it so that way you can get the information in the offseason. You can prepare yourself for the draft. I can tell you right now that having the information for your draft next year is going to be the thing that is going to help you to be one step above those other guys that are just drafting out of the Phil Steele magazine. Then again, you got guys like Gordy that draft off of Abacus that are in the championship. But it's going to be a great offseason. We're going to have fun with the College Bowl Pick'em, the CFB Dynasty first annual. We're trying to want everybody in there. If you're on Discord, it's going to be free. We're not going to charge you guys anything to do this. Just get up there. Let's have fun together. Let's end this season out on a bang, and let's compete against one another and see who's got the best game predictions.
Sounds great, man.
That being said, BMAC, for the final time this year, who is your brisket lock for this championship week?
We talked about him. We talked about why. Will Shipley. Give him a run. He's going to help you get your championship.
Will Shipley. That's going to be interesting. Hopefully he plays more than a quarter and a half this week, because that was
I know. And they're working in.
That was
Kobe
frustrating last week.
Pace. Yeah.
All right. Well, if that's it, I think that's all we got for the week. We really appreciate you guys listening all season. Like we said, there will be an off-season version of this after we go through the bowl season, but we want you guys to hang with us for bowl season. We want you guys to go up there and join the Discord, be a part of the Discord. We can still be talking about things in the off-season. We can talk about recruiting day or signing day, early signing day, bowl season, late signing day, transfer portal. There's so many things we can talk about, but we need you guys to be there so we can interact with you. BMAC, if that's all we got for today, let's take them out.
That's it. See you. Appreciate it, guys.
All right, my name is Matt Knowles. That's Brian McKelvey. This is the CFB Dynasty.com podcast. See ya.